As another year ends, we reflect on all of the hours and cumulatively days of this precious life that we will never get back, that we wasted on terrible, terrible books. Yes, indeed, this is the worst books of 2024, meaning books that I read in 2024. And clearly I'm ready to be done with this year because I have titled my list Worst of 2025. All right, so worst books. I think in previous years I have ranked them. So they were, you know, in ascending order of worstedness. I have not done so this year. I've just got a list that is in no particular order. I mean, the order is more or less chronological, but not wholly chronological. Because I just like went through my Goodreads list of books I read this year and was like, oh, bad, nope, bad, oh, bad, oh, bad. Any whoosies. Yeah, so not in any particular order. Is this really the actual 10 worst books that I read this year? Are there no books that are arguably worse than one or some of the books on this list that I read? I don't know. Would this list be different if I made it a different day at a different time? Most likely. But it would be mostly the same. There's probably like a couple that like could be swapped out for a couple different ones. But then there's others on here that were always going to be on this list, and it doesn't matter when I would have made this list. They're making the list. So what I'm saying is like these are all bad books. But if there's a book that you knew that I hated and you expected to see me talk about it here and I didn't, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's because I liked it better than these books. It doesn't probably mean anything. All I can guarantee you is that the 10 books I'm going to talk about today in this video are 10 books that I did not like and I read them this year. And as of when I wrote this list, they seemed to me to be the worst. So off we go. So top of the list, and I don't know, maybe the worst book? No. Second worst, probably? Okay, I need to stop doing that. I'm not gonna rank them, then don't rank them. So just first, chronologically, is House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. And wow. Wow, 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 wow. That was both the best and the worst Riley Sager book that I've ever read, because the reading experience to begin with was very page-turning, very engrossing, did not want to put it down, wanted to know what would happen next. I had heard from wherever it was that I heard about it existing, or wherever I got the recommendation from, or whatever put it on my radar. At the time of it going on my radar, it was made clear to me that something about this book is polarizing. Something about the twist or the ending is polarizing. So I was intrigued, and I was like, oh, I wonder if it's what kind of a twist it is that has people so on opposite ends of the spectrum in their reaction. Anyway, so I was intrigued and excited to be reading it, both because I knew that about it and because the reading experience itself, even if I hadn't known that, I thought it was a very moment-to-moment, page-to-page, very, ooh, atmospheric, what's happening? I want to know, how mysterious, I wonder what's happening. Very, like, it was an addicting read. And then I got to what makes this book so polarizing, and I won't spoil it. If you want to know what makes it so polarizing, either go find a spoiler review or read it yourself. And I really wouldn't want to take away the experience of you reading it for yourself, because if you're anything like me, it's quite an experience to read that book and reach the part where you now know why this book is polarizing and to be like, what? Excuse me? We are doing what now? So yeah, like in some ways, this was like one of the best books of the year for me, because it was certainly one of the most entertaining reads of the year. Up until the point where I reached the point, I was having a good time. And when I reached the point, I don't know if a good time is the word that I would use to describe it, but I was having a time. Because I just could not believe it. I could not believe it. I was like, no, yes, that is what we're, okay. So yeah, maybe read it. Weirdly, I'm recommending it to you. In the new year, you'll read it in a day. You will not want to put it down. First, because it's good, and then not because it's good. For different reasons. Anyway, that's number one on the list. After that is a book that I did a video on, and that is Argyle by Ellie Conway, which is the book that they made a film out of, which is actually not true. If you watched my video about Argyle, it happened in the other way. The order is reversed. The movie came first, which there's just like it's a big mess of a situation. And the end result was not a good book and not a good movie, but the movie is teensy tiny bit better than the book. So yeah, that video where I explain the whole situation with what the heck that was, I'll leave that linked if I remember. Anyway, the book was not good. Well, the most interesting thing about the book is kind of like everything surrounding why it exists and speculation about it, and then the movie-ness of it. Like, all of that was more interesting than the actual reading experience. The book itself is just like nothing. It's truly a nothing of a book. I only remember it because of the whole, like, doing the video and all this other stuff to do with it. But if all of that wasn't true about it, well, it probably wouldn't exist. But if this book somehow existed without all of the rest of that happening, or if, like, I had picked it up and never learned about the rest of this happening, like, 10 years from now, randomly stumble upon this book and read it, I would have forgotten that I read it, and it may not even have made this list because it would be so forgettable as to me not be able to really even remember if it was good or bad. I wouldn't have anything to say about it because I'd be like, what is that? Did I read that? I guess I must have done. It only stands out to me in my memory because I spent so long kind of like scripting a video and like thinking about it and whatever. But it is one of the most forgettable books that I've had the unfortunate experience to stumble across. Next is a book that, yeah, people will be mad. There's a couple on here that people will be mad. Pissing people off. Never done that before. Station 11 by Emily St. John. I never write authors down. How many years have I been doing this? I never write the author name down. And then I start filming a video and I'm like, oh, what is the author's name? Anyway, I think it's Emily St. John Mandel. That sounds correct to me, and if it's not correct, apologies. But she should apologize to me for having to sit through that book. I want to say I read this for a vlog for my patrons, or it was the buddy read with my patrons. But I don't think I would have picked it, although I did already own it. I feel like I vlogged this. But I mean, I already owned it, so like I had vaguely heard of it and wanted to read it and generally heard positive things about it. And I think it was adapted. Is that right? I've never seen the adaptation if one exists. I think one exists. I think there was a TV adaptation of it on HBO. Anyway, this book is on this list not really because it's like the worst book that I read this year or anything like that. It does have to kind of mean that because it's on this list. But it upsets me so much because of its pretension. And here I'm using the word pretension correctly. So this has come up several times. It's come up recently with like when I've been chatting with people about books, and it came up before when I was talking about House of Leaves, I think. I don't know. People misuse the word pretension. And I am guilty of this as well because I know how colloquially it is used. So I will say that I like pretentious books because I know what people mean by that and what they'll understand from me when I say that. But in actual fact, actual pretension, something that's actually pretentious, I do not like. Because pretension means that it's pretending at being something that it is not. So when I say I like something pretentious, I usually mean the kind of things that get accused of being pretentious, but they are not in fact pretentious, or I would argue they are not pretentious. They have perhaps a snooty tone, or they are academic sounding, or they are, I don't know, a little full of themselves or something like that, or navel-gazy or something like that. But actual pretension is when you are behaving as if you have depth and intelligence and something deeper or something more intellectual to offer, when in fact there is nothing there. It is just the pretense of it. That's pretension. And so, yeah, like people say The Secret History is pretentious. People say, I don't know, people say that about a lot of things. They say it about books that I like. And so then I'll say, yeah, I like pretentious books because I know those books get called that. But the real definition of pretension is what I would apply to Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Because what is the point of this? This book seems to think that it has great depth. It seems to think that it has a lot to say about... question mark? I don't know. What does this book think that it's for? What does this book think that it means? Because nothing about its setup or its prose or its ruminations or anything have any meat behind them, any weight to them, anything like deeper to chew on. There's just nothing to this book. And a nothing of a book like Argyle is a nothing of a book, and it makes this list as being the worst, but I don't really feel that angry about it. I'm mad that my time was wasted. I'm mad that paper was wasted. It's annoying. It's not good. But a book like Station 11, it seems to, again, think that it's so much more than it is. And some of it is also the way people talk about it, so I guess I can't wholly blame the book. But it is the tone of the book as well. Like, the book really just thinks it's doing something. And I assure you that it is not. Because on its fundamentals, in terms of its plotting and its world building, it's actually quite badly done and doesn't make very much sense. And a book could not make very much sense in terms of the technicalities of the setup it proposes and still be a good book, or at least a book that has something worthwhile to offer, if, okay, if we actually were to take seriously this setup and this premise that probably isn't functional, that probably wouldn't work that way, but it offers us this opportunity to ruminate so beautifully, so philosophically about the human condition or something like that. It doesn't do that. It thinks it's doing that. It doesn't do that. I really despise this book because of this, because of the fact that it's not the worst thing that I've ever read, but compared to what it seems to think that it is nowhere near that. It's not even that it falls slightly short of the mark. It is nowhere even within the ballpark of the mark. So yeah, it pisses me off. So I for people that love that book, you know, I'm really happy for you, but I was going to say tell me why, but don't tell me why. Number 4 on my list is The Luminous Dead, which I read pretty recently for Blades and Bodice Rippers. Surprise, surprise, I didn't like a Blades and Bodice Rippers book. So if you want to see, I don't think any of us really liked it. Bethany liked it the best out of all of us, but she by no means loved it. So if you want to see us chat about it, that was our Halloween book. So as always, we dress up even if it's not Halloween. But for our Halloween live show on Bethany's channel, it was Bethany's pick. We all dressed up and we all shat on The Luminous Dead, which I don't even try to remember the author's name. It's not an author that I was familiar with from before, so it truly doesn't stand out to me, and I don't have the physical book. I got it from the library. It purports to be, and I suppose is, like a speculative thriller, I guess. It's about somebody like cave diving, cave exploring, and there are technically more than 2 characters, but it's really 2 characters. There's the character who's in the cave, and then there's the voice of their, like, operator, the person, like, running their mission. And that's pretty much the whole of the book. So in theory, that setup should be quite claustrophobic and tense and psychologically, I don't know, but the book was really long and also just kind of nothing. And then the choices that it did make were baffling. And for the most part, all of us were like, well, that was a choice? Are you saying we should be rooting for this? What? So it was much more fun to discuss it than it was to read it. It was a very, very bad book to read. And if you don't have anyone to talk about it with, then there's just no upside. Next is The London Seance Society, which also don't know the author. I talked about this at length in my rant on Cozy Fantasy, and this book was kind of the one that was the catalyst for me making that video in the first place. And that was the only book in that video where I went into spoilers in that video, because I hadn't talked about it elsewhere because I had only just read it and wasn't planning on reviewing it anywhere else. This book is like historical fiction fantasy. I had seen it like placed in the cozy categories. I don't know if it should be, if it truly is, or how is that determined, but it's cozy adjacent at the very least. You know, it's more slice of life type of vignettes, but there is a plot, there's a murder mystery. It's to do, it's the London Seance Society. It's to do with clairvoyance and seances and down with the patriarchy, etc. If you want to see the full rant about that, that was in that video, freshly off reading it, which with much more detail than I could call to mind right now. But ultimately, the reason that book was the catalyst for that video and why it's on this list now is because it wasn't a very good book to begin with, and then it's just so troubling when books treat really terrible choices or really terrible behavior as fine, because the tone of the book is sort of yay for our characters, or twee, or like this was justice being served. It's very positive in the tone it takes as compared to the thing it's depicting, the things the characters actually did or said or made cause to happen. And the book's attitude does not match what has just occurred. And it's deeply troubling because the sense you get from that is that the author then must think that this is fine, because the author expects us to be cheering for this being the end result, and the end result is blood-curdling, and blood-curdling, is that what the word I want to use? It's chilling that you would write that and expect us to go, great, what a good ending, as opposed to, what? That is really messed up. So yeah, That's a lot of what that video is about. It's kind of like, just because you're writing a twee book doesn't mean you suddenly don't have to think through the implications of what you've proposed in your story. If what you've proposed in your story is actually kind of super duper messed up, it doesn't stop being messed up because your tone is like, oh, but it's like a fun girl power cozy fantasy. It's like, no. Next up is a book that I also pretty recently talked about for my little romantasy project, and that is Five Broken Blades, because I talked about it so recently. I believe the author's name is May Cortland or something like that. So that video happened, if you haven't seen it, was because I had pre-ordered several books that just looked like fantasy books to me, and then later, when it was closer to publication, realized that they were actually romantasy, which I was not aware of when I had pre-ordered them. And I decided, instead of canceling those orders or returning those orders, that I would do a little experiment reading project type of thing and try out some romantasy. Some of this now on accident that I had, and then also purposely go and pick up some romantasy on that I know is romantasy and add it to the list and kind of get a good sampling of romantasy and give the genre or subgenre a go. So Five Broken Blades was one of the accident books that caused that video to happen, and it wasn't the worst one. No, the worst one. No, I don't include DNFs on my worst books of the year, but I'm going to do a video on DNFs, which I haven't done before because I don't usually DNF books very much, but I did do a lot more DNFing this year, so I'm gonna, if I haven't already posted it, then there's gonna be a video on DNFs. So the worst book from that project was one that I DNF'd, but this was the next worst one, like the worst one that I finished. Five Broken Blades is like if Six of Crows was the worst thing ever written. Some people think Six of Crows is the worst thing ever written, but that's because they haven't read Five Broken Blades. But it's a similar kind of setup in terms of there's 6 characters, then there's a sort of a heist type of thing that is the thing they have in common, and they're all paired off with each other, so it's romantasy times 3. I guess Six of Crows could be shelved as romantasy. That subcategorization didn't exist when Six of Crows was published. I suppose Six of Crows could be categorized that way, but anyway, yeah, in Six of Crows that happens as well. Of their 6 characters, we get sort of 2 and 2 and 2 pairings, but Six of Crows is just done well because the characters are actually interesting, the heist is interesting, there's good world building, there's good intrigue, good politics. Five Broken Blades is like a child wrote that. It's really cringy, really bad. The characters are really unpleasant and insufferable. It's really amateurish. It's just so unbearable, and it's also extremely predictable. So there's lots of books that are predictable because they're following familiar tropes, but they're doing those tropes well. So you're like, okay, I know where this is going. I know what type of story this is. You're definitely not reinventing the wheel here, but you're doing it well. So like, I like these characters and I like this adventure. So like, I'm happy to go along for this journey, even if I know exactly where this journey is headed. That's totally fine. But Five Broken Blades is done badly, so the journey is not a joy to be on, neither for plot nor for characters nor for, again, it cannot be overstated. The world building, as an example, our characters eat at a tavern in this swords and sorcery world, and they get to-go boxes. To-go boxes, to-go containers for their food. Again, nothing says that that's not allowed in a fantasy book, but next, possibly the worst book that I read this year. Oh boy. The Viking Chief's Marriage Alliance by whoever that's by. The reason I read that was, the reason I had it in the first place was because it was gifted to me. Because I love Vikings. I am on record as being trash for Vikings. And someone took me at my word and gave me a Viking historical romance. And so I had it for quite a long time because I didn't want to read it, but it had been gifted to me, so I didn't really want to get rid of it. So I thought when Dealer's Choice won for my patron vlog, meaning I get to pick the book instead of my patrons, I was like, well, this will be a fun vlog. Maybe I end up liking this book, which would be a great result. But odds are I probably won't like this book, but at least it'll be a fun video for my patrons. And I expected, I would have been pleasantly surprised to like it. I expected to dislike it, but I expected my dislike of it to be just sort of like a general boredom and cringe. I expected to read it and just kind of be like, this is cringy. I'm not really into this. This is kind of silly. I'm kind of bored. Like, that's kind of what I thought I would be getting out of it, or my reaction to it would be. Instead, I was enraged for the majority of the book for one reason or another. First, I was enraged because of like historical accuracy things, which I don't go into a book like that really expecting much. I'm not expecting it to be super duper painstakingly researched. It's not that kind of a book, but even so, like just like some really basic things that I was like, I'm not expecting you to be a historian, but like, and then the plot itself, like the setup for the relationship with these characters, like the romance in it, I was like, whose fantasy is this? This is horrifying. This is so bad. I was so upset. So I got a lot more out of it than I thought that I would. Oh man, that book was bad. Oh my gosh. Next is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo that I don't remember what I gave it now. I hope I gave it 1 star. If I didn't, maybe I'll go back and change it. I might have given it 2. And if I did give it 2, it's because it's Leigh Bardugo and because the cover is pretty. Because that's a 1-star book. Just how do you make the Spanish Inquisition boring is just the question. Because the book is, it's like a nothing of a book the way that Argyle is. But Argyle isn't a historical fantasy set in the Spanish Inquisition. How did you make that boring? Not a single piece of it was good. It wasn't that like, well, the world building wasn't totally there, but it was a good character story, or, well, it was like really focused on romance, which wasn't my thing, but the romance was just like really strong. Or maybe the characters weren't so good, but you know, we really did a lot of lush historical detail with the whole Spanish Inquisition thing. None of that. Absolutely none of it. No lush detail, no sensory experience, no transported to a different time and place, no gripped by these incredible characters that are in this tough situation. Nothing. Just nothing. Just absolutely nothing. It would be bad if it was a first draft, and it was obviously not a first draft. Where is the author that gave us Six of Crows? Where is she? Is she not available? Next, again, the next 2 will for sure piss people off. There's definitely also a Venn diagram of people that this will piss off. Like a big, very large center of the Venn diagram of people that will be pissed off by the next 2. So, buckle up. Next is The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year, which I get that I'm not I don't know if I would say target audience, but like I am not a romance reader, and it is what I think they sell it as a cozy mystery romance or cozy romance mystery or something like that. I don't know. It's supposed to be like a crossover of those genres, and I don't think it did either one very well. And again, I am not like the mystery queen, and I'm not the romance queen. I am queen of no realms besides the first law, but I have read some romances and I have read some mysteries, and I certainly love the setup of being in an old estate and it's a isolated closed circle mystery and maybe throw in a romance. Like if that was a film, that absolutely sounds like the kind of movie that my mom and I would watch together and have a great time. And I think it was comped to Knives Out. I love Knives Out. I've watched it many times. And if we were doing like a Christmassy Knives Out with a bit of a romance thrown in, that sounds like wouldn't be the greatest read of all time, but it sounds like a good time. And I love the cover. The cover of this book, I love, 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 love sort of vintage looking cartoons and vintage looking advertisements and vintage looking stuff like that. So the fact that it has this kind of like vintage comic kind of look to it, that's what caught my eye in the first place. And then I looked at the premise and I was like, oh, that actually sounds kind of cute. And I mean, it was boring as all get out. The characters were really unsympathetic, uninteresting. They had zero chemistry, just no chemistry whatsoever. And then these characters that had the zero chemistry, we went from 0 to 11 on them declaring their love for each other in moments that, like, again, I know people's absolute favorites in this kind of a genre or subgenre. I will still be the person that kind of cringes at some of that type of stuff. I get it. But this wasn't like a gentle, that's a little much, kind of an eye roll. It was frankly kind of disgusting to me. And I don't mean because it's like really explicit or anything like that, because it's not. I mean like the fact that it seems to want to get this sort of casual romance mystery tone. But then the dialogue between our love interests it's at the level of, I would die without you, I could not go on without you, when we're not even a couple yet. And then we kind of are a couple, and we're, again, like these kind of like exaggerated declarations of need and desire and of devotion that I'm just like, are we there yet? And also, is there ever a reason for that? But if there is ever a reason for that, this is not no. And like, I know that some of this is sort of like the you would dream of this, and this isn't a realistic scenario kind of thing. So I try to put those goggles on to the best of my ability, though those goggles are in short supply where I'm concerned. But this kind of a thing where like the main female character is so uncertain, and so she's never going to be the one to make those kind of declarations. But then the other character, who has no reason to feel any more certainty, no reason, no assurance that his affection would be requited, is the one to just fully front that information and fully front that affection and just come out and declare those kinds of things, even though our main character is still not going to admit it, is still not going to say something. And that kind of imbalance, I just find, I'm not saying that that never happens. I'm not saying there's no like pairings of people where one is much more comfortable just kind of confessing their emotions and the other one is not. It's this feeling that I get of the expectation is like the burden is on the man to come out and be like, I know you don't care for me, but I would die for you. Because, like, men also feel insecure. Men also feel doubt. And the fact that they're expected to make these, like, ridiculous declarations of devotion to somebody who treats them like shit. Because they're like, well, they'd never be, that guy is too hot. He would never be into me anyway. So I'm going to act like I don't give two shits about him. So then when he's like, but I would die without you. And you're like, you would die without me? Is he really serious? He's probably making fun of me. I'm not going to say anything. Like, that dynamic, which I just don't want to read about it. If that's your bag, you know, do you. If you love reading that, like, sure. There's probably ridiculous things that I enjoy that are, like, not good, but I enjoy it for whatever reason. That's not one of them. So it just kind of has that tone. And then the mystery, it takes a real backseat. Like, we kind of have a mystery to kind of like get us there, but this truly is just the romance, and the romance is bad. And the mystery is kind of there to kind of give us a reason, one, for them to be together, and two, to create some suspense. So, and like a lot of the romances that I've read, this 11th hour suspense and tension is created by some kind of a miscommunication, or some ex that comes back and starts lying about like what our love interest did, or some work obligation that's parted them, or something like that. So here our, 11th hour climactic tension comes from the mystery instead. And that's fine. If they were done better, then I would be fine with that. And if someone made a movie of this, if the actors that were cast in these roles were extremely compelling, with extremely good chemistry, I could see it being a tolerable time. But the writing is bad, and there are no charismatic actors to help this along in a book. So I have been seeing this get a lot of praise. People really like this book. It is not for me. And if you are anything like me in the ways that I've just described, then be warned, you're probably not going to like it. And the last book is one that also I know a lot of people love, and I hated it, and that was The Library at Mount Jar by whoever that's by. I did read this with my patrons as a buddy read. Despised it. Also, this can keep company with Station 11. This book thinks it's deep. This book thinks it's clever. It is neither deep nor clever. It is just a jumbled, bizarre mess that's bizarre for the sake of being bizarre. It's a mess for the sake of being a mess, and thinks that that's just oh so clever and literary of it to be such a jumbled mess. But it has nothing to say. It has nothing for you to ruminate on. It has nothing to contribute. It has nothing for you to chew on. It has no greater impression to leave you with. There was no reason for it to be that way. None of the choices made in it are made for actual reasons. The choices that are made in that book are, you can just see the author being like, well, wouldn't it be so weird if I had this character dressed this way? Like, it's just because it's bizarre. Isn't it bizarre? It's so bizarre. You're like, yeah, it's bizarre. But why? Why is this here? And if you were doing, I don't know, something that's like a truly just kind of absurdist type of story, like Hitchhiker's Guide or something, you can get away with some choices like that. But even then, like, Hitchhiker's Guide actually has something more profound for you to chew on. It's gross, and it's violent, and it's messy, and it's confused, and I understood what happened. This isn't a case of, oh, you didn't get it. No, I got it. There was no reason for it to be written like that. There was no reason for it to be written at all. So, yeah. I know a lot of people love that book. And, again, don't tell me why. I don't care. And that's my list. Did I read worse books? Like, were some of the romantasy books from the Romantasy Project worse? I don't know. They didn't piss me off as much, obviously. think it's maybe because when my expectations are low already, then I'm not that upset when my low expectations are met. So yeah, I'm sorry that I've pissed you off, because it's almost guaranteed that at least one of these pissed you off. I feel like it's the rare reader that came through this video unscathed. But if you also hated all the books that I hated, then welcome. You're in the right place. Haters unite. If you loved all of the books that I hated, I'm sorry, and I don't know why you're watching this video. But masochists unite. Okay, that's all I have to say. I'm just rambling now. I don't know what order I'm posting these videos, but either I have posted the best of, or I'm about to post the best of, or the DNFs either have, will, and hopefully I'll have better reads in 2025. Yeah, okay.